I grew up around people who argued all of the time. These arguments range from things which are unavoidable due to the way daily life unfolds, like household chores and money, to more superfluous arguments about politics and philosophy. It seems like arguing is the lion's share of what we do as humans. I mean, it's the main thing you're taught in school. You could say the true goal of an education is to teach you how to argue. However, I never liked to argue. I was always more of a listener, and I'm still like that to this day. I love to listen. It's funny because I've become somewhat of a professional yapper, but I'm the one who loves to hear people talk. Even if the person has nothing interesting to say, I always try to find some value in the interaction. This temperament I possess gave me a unique perspective because I'm frequently positioned as the objective viewer watching from the outside with no particular dog in the fight. This position of voyeurism makes it easy to study the mechanism of action at play when we communicate. It's kind of how an anthropologist is able to study cultures, and I could see that the real basis behind arguments isn't right and wrong. That's only how it appears on the surface. It isn't even about true and false. Both parties always think they are right in speaking the truth. And this is what interests me. How can it be the case that both people believe they are true and the other false? Well, I discovered there is a reason for this. It's because right and wrong are emergent properties of a more fundamental dynamic, which is sense and nonsense. These are two root modes. Everything else is derivative and built on top of this fundamental dynamic of sense and nonsense. I mean, isn't that the universal retort people give when they encounter an antithetical argument? Their go-to response is to say that this is nonsense. You're speaking nonsense to their intellectual opponent. Sometimes you come across a more mature and open-minded person who will phrase it as, I don't understand, or I don't get what you're trying to say. But most people say it's nonsense. And me being someone who is publicly front-facing, meaning I speak directly to the public, I get this all of the time. I not only see this dynamic playing out as a voyeur, but am now an active participant in it, and it's especially exaggerated due to the uniqueness of my message. I get a lot of interesting audience feedback, and most of the time it's people saying, wow, this makes perfect sense, thank you. But many times I get people who claim that I'm speaking nonsense. I spent so much time trying to understand why this happens. You can say I became obsessed with making sense of sense making. This phenomenon of something making sense and how it governs our lives. This is what kickstarted my career, if you want to call it that. But the further I go down the rabbit hole, the less this looks like a career, and the more this starts to feel like something else entirely, because investigating this dynamic of sense and nonsense isn't just information for its own sake. It isn't something you do just to sound profound at dinner parties. It radically changes you whether you like it or not. It's spooky stuff. Now, I use the idea of argumentation as a way to introduce this video, but this is obviously bigger than debate rhetoric. The human life world is just an extension of language, and all language operate based on this fundamental dynamic. Sense and nonsense in the arena of ideas is built on top of biological processes, which make literal sense of the world we all occupy. We call these biological processes the senses, right? Taste, touch, etc. It's not a coincidence that the word nonsense is also a synonym for non-perception. It's like being blind. To not sense is a form of ignorance, hidden information. And when we are talking about normal communication between people, it's phrased as a lack of understanding. In short, our bodies sense the material world and our minds make sense of ideas. Now, what I want to talk about is how anything is able to make sense at all. This is going to be very meta and perhaps confusing, but it's super important. Most people just say things make sense because they do and move on. But you and I aren't like that for whatever reason. Perhaps it's our curse. When you really examine this phenomenon of sense making, there is only one conclusion that can be drawn. We aren't the ones who do it. We are inside of something that does it for us. This is both logically necessary and irrationally necessary. We have to be contained by it or confined by it or attached to it, however you want to view it. And there is a simple way to demonstrate this. It's because making sense is the concept of order, and in order for there to be order, there must be a border. I know it sounds like a nursery rhyme, but I'm not talking in metaphorical circles here. It's a literal circle. An intuitive way of approaching it is through musical analogy. In music theory, you have harmony and dissonance, where harmony is typically considered to be stable arrangements deemed as pleasant, while dissonance is unstable and chaotic. These are obviously stand-ins for order and disorder. Well, only closed systems can generate harmonics because music depends on feedback. So you can have disorder in a closed system, but you cannot have order without one. It's a requirement. And you might be thinking, these are just shapes and sound is a wave. Isn't this apples and oranges? But shapes and waves have more to do with each other than you think. This is really just a conceptualization tool, but even when you look at a naked wave, the same principle applies because it's just a fact of nature. There is a natural tension which pulls against excitation, keeping it stable. I mean, this is what a wave is. A physicist will tell you that this tension pulling against excitation is rest. What goes up must come down. Excitation naturally returns to a state of rest, and you should know by now that this rest state is pattern, order, sense. Tension implies restraint, prevention, it's containment. Without a border, nothing would make sense. Everything would fly out into obscurity in accordance with the inverse square law. In essence, there would be no possible way for echoing to occur, and resonance is impossible. This is precisely why there is no sound in space. There is no feedback. When you scream in space, the sound has no way back to your ear, so it sounds like nothing. It's nonsense. In a scenario where there is no border, energy leaves and never returns because it has no way to. Now, this is the description of openness, is it not? Pure openness makes return impossible. This is the nature of the imagination. It's openness, unbridled novelty. Nothing ever happens twice, ever. It's all steam ahead all of the time. There is no returning. However, we know reality isn't completely open based on the fact that we exist. You learn in elementary school about the laws of conservation. This implies closure. Conservation requires shielding or protection. According to these laws, nothing comes in, nothing goes out. Everything is recycled. It is contained. From another perspective, there is a symmetry that must be maintained. Another way of looking at symmetry is as tension, like how we saw with the waves. I'm trying to drive the point home that this is a necessary feature of order. This prerequisite of containment can be viewed as a fundamental referencing, a universal base or anchor, which is why I brought up tension. But I think the most intuitive way to understand this is via containment, because our minds naturally understand geometry. I mean, we learned this in elementary school. All a container is everything being locked into the same field of reference. It's like a universal baseline. It's the one thing that everything has in common. In basic Euclidean geometry, any non-straight line, aka curve, will eventually return to itself. It is the capacity for return to take place, to see where you've been, self-reference. This is the phenomenon of memory. And I call it that because it is indistinguishable from what we refer to as the past. It's how we are able to conceptualize it. The rational way of explaining it is to say that when our expectations based on previous outcomes are met, sense-making happens. When something happens that doesn't match what happened before, it is a surprise. Novelty. Something new happens. Simply put, a pattern is something which repeats. This prefix of re tells you everything you need to know. Repeat, recycle, return, reverberate, resonate, relationship, refer. No, not that kind of reefer. Get your mind out of the gutter. It's self-reference. This thing we call the past must be able to branch out and latch on, or there is a break in continuity. There is a gap, openness, or nonsense. If you look at music again, music as a phenomenon is only possible because of memory. Your mind holds previous notes in contrast with what you are currently hearing. I've mentioned this before. The relationships between the phantom notes of the past and the notes in the present are how we are able to experience music. This just happens so fast we aren't even aware it's happening. It's literally lightning fast since it's all bioelectric signaling. Without this happening, music would sound like nonsense. I often bring up that this is what it's like to have Alzheimer's or dementia. It's a state of utter confusion. It's nonsense. Imagine listening to a song where every second you forgot the notes which occurred before. I'll make it even simpler for you to understand. Imagine someone speaking to you and you forget every word they say after they say it. So each time they speak, it's like the first word is being said. It's hard to even imagine what that's like, isn't it? Especially when there are languages like Spanish where you don't find out what happened in the beginning of the sentence until the last word is said. Well, music works the same way. Music is just a language. It's often called the universal language. This is also why resolution is so important in music and storytelling as well. It shouldn't come as a shock that we call the feeling before this resolution occurs tension. The dissonance of the previous process is resolved in the present, and we feel a cathartic sense of release. The tension is resolved. There is a payoff. This idea of resolution and redemption is naturally important to us. It's because we are living out cosmic principles. We are extensions of language. The past is ultimately being redeemed by the future. They are releasing their tension. Memory and the imagination have the relationship of two people arguing. It's sense and nonsense. I don't know if they love or hate each other, but they can't get enough of each other. Another example we see of closure in music is the drone. You've heard it before, I'm sure. It's heavily used in Eastern forms of music where there is a foundational note which all of the other notes exist in reference to. It's like the base or the anchor of the song that holds it all together, the thread found in every piece of the garment. This is containment. This is memory, a constant returning, reference to or relationship with. Now, the beautiful part about all this and why I set this up using music is that I can demonstrate to you that reality itself has a drone just like this. It's the anchor or containment vehicle that everything exists in reference to. We are inside of something, and we have the math to show it, a la chaos theory and central limit theorem. Central limit theorem pretty much states that there is order in all events. You just need a big enough sample size and a predictable distribution will emerge. Once you gather enough data, it becomes information. An intuitive way of looking at it is to just say if something appears chaotic, you just don't know enough about it. You don't have enough data. Nonsense is a lack of understanding. Once again, it's all about sense and nonsense. True randomness is a very contentious topic. People argue if it's even a real thing, and it would take its own video for me to lay out what's really happening there. But for the sake of simplicity, true randomness isn't real. It's the antithesis to what we would consider to be real. It's nonsense, aka the imagination. It's what lies beyond the containment vehicle we are currently within. It truly is no man's land. Everything we experience exists on a spectrum of complexity where the closer to the edge of understanding you go, the more random things appear. Which is funny because the more random things appear, the more things disappear. We stop sensing them. They become nonsense. These processes that we think are truly random right now, like certain quantum phenomena, aren't truly random, simply based on the premise that we are even aware that something is happening. True randomness is the complete lack of information. It is non-perception. Even when it comes to the imagination, I'm on record saying that it is incomprehensible to us. The imagination is beyond our wildest imagination. I call it the imagination because that's the closest we can get to it without completely disintegrating into nothing, because being itself is order. In order for anything to happen, it must be ordered. It has to make some kind of sense somewhere. It's a prerequisite. When it comes to a lot of these phenomena which lay on the edge of understanding, what we have is a partial perception of them. This is why we are able to partially explain them. It's like trying to identify an object in a pitch black room. You can feel it, you can hear it, maybe even smell it. You know something is there, however, you are missing the necessary faculties to fully perceive it. It's like an out of focus image where you can't positively identify it, but you know something is there. And focus is a good way of putting it, where the more in focus something is, the more real it becomes, the more certain you become of it, because knowledge is crystallized attention. Contrarily, the more out of focus something is, the less real it appears, the less certain you are of it. This is where magic is able to enter the picture. This partial perception of bumping into something in the dark while not being able to identify it is what chaos is. And if you are a seeker of any kind, this will be the majority of what you experience because you are running the edges of human understanding. It's just important to know what's happening to you. When chaos is represented mathematically, it's called a chaotic system. Chaotic systems are still deterministic, meaning they are still ordered. It's just that we don't have all of the quote-unquote senses required to fully perceive them, but they are still some kind of pattern. We learned that even when we think we are being random or that randomness is occurring, it is actually secretly complying with the underlying harmonic structure of reality. There is a hidden order, a returning, the thread found in every piece of the garment. It's the note of the drone always humming in the background that everything exists in reference to. I call it the song of nature. Everything always returns to this. It's the anchor. If you want to be mathematical about it and call it some kind of standard distribution or what have you, that's fine. But for all intents and purposes, it's a frequency. That's what statistics analyzes anyways, frequencies of events. There's a reason why storytelling structure follows the pattern it does. It's because this is what everything follows, this same frequency. And stories are just the way we tune into this frequency, as it were. It's the same way that the internet isn't on the computer is on the internet. Imagine someone telling you that there are people living inside of the TV because they see them on the screen, or there are little people living inside the radio because you hear voices coming from it. We don't possess intelligence. We are intelligence. We participate in it or tune into it. I thought of a good example to demonstrate this when I was riding public transport the other day. There was a festival in town and the bus was filled with tourists. They were all talking and carrying out various conversations held in different groups depending on who knew each other and who was sitting next to who and all of that kind of jazz. Now, all I heard was a crowd of people talking all at once. It was just noise or chaos. But when I focused on any particular person, I could hear exactly what they were talking about. So in this scenario, when you zoom out, it's chaotic, but when you zoom in or focus, it's ordered. However, this zoomed out chaos still makes sense. It's literally made up of ordered processes. It's just a kind of order that I can't interpret, so it appears like chaos. This is our situation. We are zoomed in portions of the greater whole. We have a localized position in a sea of information. And for us, this local position is where everything makes sense. This local position is the part of intelligence we are able to participate in. In order for me to experience the conversation of the tourist, I had to focus on a specific group. You could say this is like the bandwidth I'm allotted as a Homo sapien. Our antenna has a certain range it can tolerate before things fall out of focus and become nonsensical. You could say me trying to hear everyone talking at once is like trying to pick up X-rays with a radio antenna. Now, there is a problem people often have with this. They say, well, if it's all ordered, why don't we understand it? If pattern is perception and everything is patterned, then how can there be things we don't know? This is actually a big topic of discussion that thinkers are having today, and it can appear like quite the conundrum, even paradoxical. That is, until you allow for the very obvious and very spooky idea that order isn't made in the service of the Homo sapien. There is a such thing as a limit on how much we are able to know and perceive as human beings. This is an ideological battleground I see taking place that people can't accept, and I know why, but I'll try not to get too distracted here. There are forms of order that don't make sense to us, like we see with deterministic chaos. I'd say most order is off of our radar. Speaking of bandwidth and antenna analogies, we only participate in a sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is a cliche that everyone points out. We only consciously interpret a few dimensions when we know there are many others. We play with these ideas all the time. What would reality look like if you could perceive in 4D? How would music sound in an 8-dimensional geometric plane? What does a 5D hamburger taste like? Do these concepts even apply in those spaces? We know they are out there, but we lack the faculties to fully perceive them. Some we can only talk about using math. Others, we have to build special machines to even be aware of their presence. The point is that we only partially grasp them. We have our bandwidth that we participate in where things make sense. And the further away from it we go, the less information we are able to process. Now, what these other forms of order are like, or who are they for, you can go as schizo as you'd like. Alien minds, extra-dimensional entities, complex mathematical objects, angels, electromagnetic spirits, some kind of technological intellecty. I have no idea, maybe all of the above, but it looks like we are discovering what our ancient ancestors already knew. We are not alone. You know, there's actually all kinds of research into this that suggests swarming organisms tap into a different kind of intelligence. We'd call it a hive mind. And we experience this too. We form mobs. Mob behavior is very peculiar. If you've ever been in one, you do feel something taking over you. This could be a concert, a sporting event, a political rally, people acting a fool in the streets in some kind of riot. You sort of lose your identity within the group. This even ties into the Gaia hypothesis, which pretty much says that the Earth itself has a mind, which I do believe to be true on some level. The way I see it is that we are in a giant cosmic organism, but we will circle back to this. Human understanding is limited, but understanding itself is endless. If you look at it with common sense, it's just obvious. Why should a specific mammal be allowed to understand the totality of all knowledge? It's just silly. This is the equivalent of becoming an all-knowing God. I want you to think for a few moments. Does that make any sense? A primate of all things becoming an all-knowing God? So why do we feel like it's somehow our God-given right? The full breakdown on this sentiment is beyond the scope of this video, but long story short, it's because we suffer from an identity crisis. Somehow deep down the human being knows it isn't a Homo sapien, it's inside of one or attached to one. It's funny because most people I've seen don't even acknowledge us as being animals. It's almost viewed as sacrilege or an insult to insinuate that we are one, even though we literally are. It's because when we use this word we somehow know we are pointing to something which isn't biological. It's like, what in the hell am I? This is why you see these same motifs pop up in human history of the spirit being inside of flesh, mind that is attached to matter, light that is trapped in a body. The reason for this is because it's all about consciousness and its nature. And it's here where I want to introduce what this video is about. The Logos. This is the thing we are inside of. This is, for all intents and purposes, consciousness. You haven't noticed that the universal condition is everyone believes they are right? It's like two people arguing. War means we are right. And it's not just humanity. The wolf thinks it has the right to eat the rabbit, and the right thinks it's right for the wolf to starve to death. All of this is because of the Logos. Sense making happens because each perspective is the center of the universe. We discovered in physics that due to the infinite nature of the universe, it has no true fixed center. I'm the center of the universe, you are, the sun is. It doesn't matter. The only reason why we say the earth revolves around the sun is because the math is just easier to manage. That's literally it. You can place the center anywhere and it will still be true. Jorge Luis Borges called it a fearful sphere whose center is everywhere, quoting Giordano Bruno and other historical figures. The Logos is the eternal, the infinite. This is what infinity is. Infinity is an exclusionary device that represents the exhaustion of potential, aka order. That's the real implication of it. People like to argue about this, but they never look at it from a balanced perspective. This is because they limit infinity to the domain of mathematics and completely disregard metaphysics. Infinity is, of course, encountered in math, but it isn't just a mathematical concept. It's a feature of mind, and since we use our mind to do math, then of course we will naturally encounter it. Infinity is all about order and the creation of limits. It's like this inverse way of saying all. It represents the exhaustion of potential in a given domain. I'm getting into far out metaphysics here, but infinity describes temporal objects or time objects. Same difference. Douglas Hofstadter calls them strange loops. It's pattern. This is why some infinities are bigger than others but are still infinite. It's the same way some objects are bigger than others, but they are both still objects, because infinity is the capacity for objects to exist. It is the exhaustion of potential. You can look at it like this. If I put you in a room and I place the exit an infinite distance away, I'm locking you in the room for eternity. It's a temporal time trap or container that we call forever. Infinity is classically viewed as a non-terminating process. However, this is a redundant statement. Process is non-termination. If you are proceeding, you are not stopping. People can't see that they are just describing time. Infinity terminates where processes stop, aka the end of time. In simple terms, you get closer to the edge of infinity as time reaches zero, because time is the moving image of eternity, as Plato said. When time ends, nothing else can happen. The potential is exhausted and you're only left with pattern. Let's say you have universe 1 and universe 2. Universe 1 existed for 1 trillion years and universe 2 existed for 1 billion years. If you are inside each respective universe, they would both appear to be infinite. However, if you sat in some higher dimension, you could see that they are objects. They would have something akin to different masses, and I'm using air quotes around mass. They are both objects, but one is bigger than the other in the sense that it contains more events or more time. This is why some infinities can be larger than others. If you put a flatlander in a circle, it thinks it's going on forever. You see it's inside of an object. You can put another flatlander in a bigger circle and it will also think that it's going on forever, but you see it as a different sized object. I guess you could say how we look at length. We'd say that an object won't fit in my car. It's too many feet long. In a higher dimension, you'd say that object is too many years long. It won't fit. I say all the time that the totality of your life collapses into a single object, which serves as a higher dimensional building block of some kind. And I know this is all probably confusing and borderline schizo. I'm sure I've drifted into nonsense territory for you. But this is how quantum foam can generate universes which last microns of a second. But from the perspective of the Boltzmann brain in said universe, it's infinite. We could be in one of those fluctuations right now. Physicists have suggested this and played with this idea for a while now. I'd even argue that this is why you can live an entire life in a dream or psychedelic trance, but wake up to see only an hour has passed. Each perspective is like its own time-dilated universe. The life of a tree lasts hundreds of years. The life of a gnat lasts hundreds of minutes. But from each of their perspectives, time is moving normally. Everything makes sense in their world. We see the hummingbird and think it's fast. The hummingbird sees us and thinks we are slow. This is because our frame of reference is different. We have a different baseline. Framing, reference, baseline, and anchor. This is why everyone believes they are right, because the logos allows for anything to be the center where the subject's own version of normal is established. Boy, we took one heck of a detour, but let's just say we took the scenic route. My point is that the logos is the infinite, which allows everyone to be the main character of their own story and everyone else to be supporting roles. To invoke a many worlds analogy here, there is a universe where people are the exact opposite of us. They talk backwards, they walk backwards, they fart from their mouths and belch from their butts, and from their perspective, it's completely normal, and we are the backwards ones. Everyone thinks they are right side up from their perspective, and they are, because order is inescapable. This is how the logos works, and this is precisely what a perspective is. A perspective is the ability to be the center of attention. It is attention. It's focus. Like how I had to focus on each conversation in order to participate. This is once again because of memory. Memory is the capacity to return, right? It's the note that's always present, humming in the background, the thread that's found in every part of the garment. Well, the thing you constantly return to is you. You are the drone, the anchor of the story. When you narrate, you don't narrate the day, you narrate your day. The day is filled with so many events and commotion that it's chaos, like the people talking on the bus. You can only participate in a small slice of the day. That's your bandwidth. When you talk about your day, things make entrances and exits in the story, but you are the thing which is found in every detail of the tale. Everything exists in relationship to you from your perspective. This is how memory works and why I say it's like gravity. It's what keeps you grounded. You are contained to your own universe by some kind of force that keeps you anchored. Without it, you would just simply forget who you are. It's like having dementia or Alzheimer's. Within Gnosticism, this force is quite literally the pull of the demiurge, trapping you in a prison of matter. This is what it means to have a perspective. It's your identity. It's the capacity to have memories. If you could somehow overcome this force, you would be able to be something else. You would lose your identity. It would be like completely forgetting who you are and is virtually indistinguishable from dying. Storytelling is a good way to illustrate this because it's literally all about perspective. When you watch a movie or play a video game, you follow the main character. If you want to know what anyone else is doing, you have to leave the main character and become some other character. And in that moment, they become the center of attention, the new main character. You sacrifice the information of one to become the other. That's what order is. It's the sacrificing of information for the sake of closure. It's the creation of boundaries to be clothed. The superposition is unresolved tension. It's openness, the doorway to the imagination. In order for anything to officially happen, a sacrifice must be made. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to decide. It's a decision. Now you might say, well, you don't need to become the other character because the main character can see what others are doing. This is partially true, literally. I'm trying to show you how consciousness works. The fidelity of the information depends on how close you are to them in possibility space. The amount of hidden information decreases as I get closer to being you. Put simply, the closer you are to becoming them, the more certain you are of what they are doing. If I'm never with you, I can't know anything you are doing. You are a complete mystery. If I'm with you some of the time, I only see some of what you are doing. If I'm with you all of the time, I can see everything you are doing. However, I don't know anything you are thinking. In order to get over this final hump, I would literally have to become you. This is why we are able to lie. Lying can only take place because of missing information. We can hide our thoughts. And I've already talked about how the discovery of the lie impacted us evolutionarily. But if you pay attention, what lying really facilitates is magic. I can trick you. Magic works because there are gaps in your perception. I keep saying this. Predation exists because of blind spots. Memory operates based on sameness and closeness. It's proximity, likeness, and relation. This is how knowledge works. Why do you think homicide investigations work this way? They start with who's closest to the victim. If a spouse dies, they ask the other spouse. They investigate the other spouse. They look at the family. They look at friends. It's almost never a random stranger who did it. It was someone who was close to them. They either looked like them or were related to them. And the closer they are to the victim, the harder it is for them to lie. If they determine that the husband was killed between the hours of 5 p.m. and 10 p.m., the first person they're going to question is the wife. Where were you between the hours of 5 p.m. and 10 p.m.? And if she says, I wasn't with my husband, then they're going to know that's a red flag. Who isn't with their husband between 5 and 10 p.m.? Now, on the opposite side, random assaults are the hardest to solve because there is so much missing information. There are no connections that can be made. These are cases that normally go cold, or they're just determined to be wrong place, wrong time. Memory is all about closeness, sameness, similarity. It's proximity, likeness, and relation. Distance creates difference. You get in your car and drive 100 miles, people will be somewhat different. You get in a plane and travel 1,000 miles, people will be very different. This is how memory works. The same way something can be so distant in 3D space it lies beyond your perception, something can also be so distant in possibility space that you can't perceive it. It's nonsense. This is why Julius Caesar couldn't ask about the battery life of the iPhone 12. That idea was too far in the future, aka possibility space. It was an idea that his quote-unquote third eye couldn't see in the imagination. This is also why if you were to go back in time and show Julius Caesar the iPhone, he would think it's some kind of alien technology because distance creates difference. It's too different from what he knows. It's just the way that attention works, and by default, it's the way that reality works. Historically, people have said that consciousness is like a spotlight. I say it's more like an event space. Your senses naturally have a field of range that extends into space up to a given point, which may be slightly different for each person. This bubble is your perception. When someone is stuck in their own little world, we say you live in a bubble, right? Or an echo chamber. Now, this next part is the meta-abstraction that I find many people struggle with. This bubble is just your bubble, but there is a master bubble where bubbleness comes from. It really is hard to make a comparison, and I can see why it's a tough concept to understand, but it really is just knowing. You can think of it like this. You can have knowledge of plants, you can have knowledge of movies, math, etc. But they are all still knowledge, just different forms of knowledge. Likewise, there is my bubble, your bubble, the bubble of the earth, the bubble of the universe. It's all still a bubble. No matter what, This bubble will always appear, and we are just forms of it. We participate in it. My bubble is to place me at the center. The Earth's bubble is to place the Earth at the center, and you can put anything in the center, which we covered earlier. This bubble is very important. It is the thing, the foundational event space. Many of the ancient Greeks actually believed that God was a sphere. It's been called an endless sphere of intelligence. This is the Logos. It isn't a literal geometric shape, but rather perspectivity itself. It is the spotlight. The Logos is the foundational border which contextualizes everything. It is everything. This is what we are inside of. I always circle back to saying it's what we call the past. The only reason why anything makes sense is because of it. It makes something we call context possible. It's pattern, connection, information, and relationships. You obviously can't connect to the future. The future is uncertain. It cannot be grasped. Connections fundamentally have to extend into the past. The same with relationships. The past is where all knowledge has to be stored, and in modern times we call the storage of information memory, which is why I call it that. The concept of storage and information are interdependent. To be information is to be preserved, and preservation is always information. This is memory, this loop of self-justification. This is the most fundamental thing that can be said about this. Most philosophers try to come up with their own proprietary names and systems, but I like to keep everything as simple and as down to earth as possible. Now, the thing is, we think of the past as being behind us and the future as being in front while we move in this linear fashion. And while this makes it easier to talk about and conceptualize time, this is the biggest misconception. It isn't that simple. Yesterday isn't behind you. Yesterday was revealed to you, and that's what it means for something to happen. It's revelation. This idea has been represented in philosophy and media for centuries. Look at the movie Total Recall or The Matrix. That's another popular one. If I were to place memories in your brain of you visiting Tokyo, then you visited Tokyo. The only reason people are able to argue against this is because we are able to appeal to an external authority. In this case, it's the person who implanted the memories, right? I contain the quote unquote objective truth. I secretly know that you really didn't visit Tokyo. This really is just an easy out that people try to take that you can remove entirely. For example, Bertrand Russell had the 5-minute hypothesis, which pretty much states that the entire history of the universe could have popped into our brains 5 minutes ago, and it would be literally impossible to disprove. There would be no external authority to appeal to. What this thought experiment does is illustrate the nature of the past. The past is no different than knowing. It is knowledge, and the Logos is knowledge itself. Everything we believe to be true with the fabric of our being could have been put into our brains a millisecond ago, and we would have no way of knowing. The universe can be switched right now to the land of unicorns and rainbows with its own history and dynamics, and that would become the new official narrative. We would be none the wiser. We would think this is the way it's always been. And I know this may seem ridiculous or like nonsense, but I'm trying to show you the nature of knowledge, which is just a philosophical way of saying God's nature. I'm trying to show you what God can do. It can do anything. That's what the Logos is. It is anything and everything, all knowledge. It sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous. Albert Camus says it's the absurd. The Logos is everything that can possibly happen. It's the limit case for all possibilities, the set which contains all sets including itself, the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and end. Its body is like a cosmic memory database which contains all information. This is the past. I've been echoing throughout my videos that the past is the cosmic body of the Logos. Maybe a better way to think of it is as reality's brain. Your past is stored in your brain, right? Well, what I'm saying is that the entirety of the past is stored in a kind of cosmic brain. It's nature's brain. The web like fractal matrix is like the gray matter within the brain of the logos. This is where we are. We are like little dendritic nerves in a cosmic brain or memory cells in an alien computational machinery. It's some kind of organism where the line between it being technology and biology is too blurred to really see the difference. I keep driving the point home that nature is like the ultimate technology. It's a being made of language or information, whatever you prefer. When I first started talking about this publicly, someone said, "It sounds like you're talking about the Akashic Records." So I looked up what the Akashic Records was, and I was pleased to see that I am not alone. Other people could see it too. But I'll pat myself on the back here and say I think I explain it the best. The Akashic Records is like some kind of recursive field or morphogenetic field. I was recently introduced to Stephen Wolfram, and he calls it the Ruliad. He describes it as the entangled limit of all possible computational processes and is a logically necessary prerequisite for being. Well, that's everything I said in the beginning of this video. He says the Ruliad is entangled. Einstein says it's a smooth continuum. I say it's infinitely complex, but tomato, tomato. However, there is something missing from all of these other explanations like the Akashic Records and the Ruliad. Maybe they can't see it, maybe I'm cuckoo, or perhaps I'm just willing to risk my non-existent reputation by saying it out loud and they weren't. What they are doing is talking about its brain. They phrase it as being a structure, a record log, or computational array. But that is only a part of the puzzle. That's only the body/brain of the logos. However, the logos is alive. It is life as far as I can tell. It's a sentient being. It has some kind of personality. The logos is like the mind which lives inside of the structure or is attached to it or whatever. The same way you have a mind that is attached to your brain because we are like microcosms of it. This is how it engages in self-reflection. We are all like ants in a collective hive mind, i.e. the oversoul of Ralph Waldo Emerson and the collective unconscious of Carl Jung. The ancients called it the anima mundi or world soul. Consciousness is like a unified field with localized entities. We are back to this whole localization concept. I guess this is a long-winded way of saying that intelligence itself is some kind of being that we are inside of. And this may sound like panpsychism. However, it isn't simply that the universe is alive. It's more like all possible universes are the cells in the body of a superorganism. This is what nature really is. Its body has an anatomy made of processes just like everything else within it because everything is made in its likeness. It's like the master blueprint we all follow. I always found it so fascinating that everything we consider to be matter is really just processes. This is the entryway into woo-woo idealism. This is why the word frequency is so prevalent on the woo-woo side of things. The laws of Hermeticism talk about the law of vibration and whatnot. Everything is just processes, layered activity. Matter isn't solid stuff. Matter is the activity which is closer to us in possibility space. That's why it feels the most real. The clothes you are wearing are a process, but to you, it's a thing. You don't view your t-shirt as currently happening. Your shirt isn't shirting. You view it like it's already happened. It's completed. It's in the past. So which one is it? It's both. If you shrink down to the molecular level, it's a certain type of activity. When you zoom out, this activity collapses into a single object that serves as the platform for more novel activity. This is just like the situation we covered earlier with infinity. Inside the shirt, it's a non-terminating process. Outside the shirt, the process is viewed as being already completed. This is emergent complexity. But you'll notice that the only thing that's changed is the distance you've traveled. The quote-unquote inside of the clothing on your body is actually very far away from you. The atoms on your shirt are farther away from you than the most distant galaxy. I don't know if you knew that. To shrink is to travel very far. And coincidentally, the further away we travel from our baseline, the stranger things become and the less real they appear to us because distance creates difference. When we found out we are made of tiny organisms, it completely blew our minds. Now we are down to the quantum realm where things barely make any sense at all. The Logos works the same way in the opposite direction too. This universe is a process to us, but that's not what it is when you zoom out. This is what Einstein was figuring out with the black universe. It collapses into a single object of some kind that's probably the platform for more novel activity. You'll hear me say something like what cells are to us, a universe is to the Logos, but once again, it's just a conceptualization tool. It's the furthest I'm able to imagine, and that's what the Logos always winds up being. The limit that's stopping us from completely disintegrating into the imagination. From the dawn of man, what we consider to be everything has been expanding. We went from talking about the universe to all possible universes, right? For our prehistoric ancestors, this limit was the forest or something like that, the plains of Africa. The body of the Logos is like a giant superdimensional manifold. This is hard to explain, but think about your body and how it's put together. You literally have strange quantum mechanical phenomena taking place inside of you right now. Things passing in from other dimensions, virtual particles, etc. Just think about when you eat. You can take a biological organism and consume it. Then a cascade of transformations take place which echo all the way down to the atomic level. Well, if you were to be swallowed by the Logos, you would experience a series of transformations that are so vast you can't even imagine it. And that's what's happening to everything. We are being passed through the digestive system of this entity and being transformed all along the way. This thing we call bodily death is like being passed from the stomach to the small intestine or something like that. We see something like this demonstrated in the Wheel of Samsara. It's a vast living system of intelligence that expands into countless dimensions. I say it's like a multidimensional spinning top. You have states of rest, aka patterns, constantly bursting into new dimensions of complexity. This is clearly demonstrated in physics. Let's say first you start off with an initial fixed position. This is a state of rest. Then you introduce novelty, and now this position can change, and you've entered the second dimension. This keeps on happening, and you unfold into new dimensions along the way. For example, within physics, you start with a position. Change in this position is called velocity. Then change in velocity is called acceleration. Change in acceleration is called jerk. Then change in jerk is called jounce. You see, there is this unfolding context. This process keeps on going because the Logos is endlessly unfolding context. We just can't continue to follow it all the way because we are limited in our perception. What you wind up with at the end of this is a giant multidimensional machine or body or technology. I really don't know. I say it's a multidimensional spinning top, just because it sounds cool. Spooky stuff, isn't it? Now, the $1,000,000 question is, what in the world is this thing? I have more questions than answers, I assure you. I call it the Logos to keep in line with tradition because all of the relevant literature I found that address it give it that name. They describe it as being a facet of God. At least within the Western tradition, that is. Within Christianity and the Poimandres, it's called the Son of God. And to be honest, it does appear that all roads lead to some kind of theology. I'm on record stating that memory and the imagination are like two sides of the same transcendent process. It definitely helps me understand the Trinity of Christianity. They are all one somehow, like different personalities of the same being. The problem is that theology is a breeding ground for confusion because we impose our morality onto it and everyone thinks they are right. For example, this concept I've laid out as memory has been framed all kinds of different ways. Some even say it's Lucifer. Rudolf Steiner talks about a luciferic and harmonic impulse that presents as this process of self-replication like cancer. The idea of gaining knowledge is commonly deemed as being this dirty thing, the evil scientist trope, right? Lucifer, the light bringer, the eating of the fruit of knowledge. This is all some kind of foolish Faustian attempt to become God that is doomed to fail from a certain perspective. Then there are versions of the story where the serpent is the good guy. The imagination is framed as being a destructive force that wants to keep everything in a state of ignorance. It has something to do with death, right? It is a force that destroys what was built. It ruptures boundaries. So which way is the right way? Is the accumulation of knowledge demonic or angelic? I don't know if the imagination is like the rebellious child who refuses to be disciplined and responsible, while the logos is the ordering principle of the father. Or it could be the other way around, where the logos is the power hungry youth and the imagination is the wise old man who knows it's all for naught, because in the end, it really doesn't matter. Power is just a fantasy. Kind of like that meme where the guy is chasing the money and by the time he gets it, game over. It's time to die. There's nothing at the end. Who's the hero and who's the villain changes depending on who's telling the story. It's like how what's masculine and what's feminine are these shifting poles, as I discussed in my most recent video about memory and the imagination in real life. You'll find that it's mostly a judgment call. It's subjective. It's determined by how people feel. One thing I've learned about us is that facts are actually made of our feelings. And I'll have to make a separate video on how feelings tie into the divine timing of the logos, because this video is becoming comically long. The word logos, first attributed to Heraclitus, means word, but it also means logic, understanding, order, reason. And for all intents and purposes, knowledge, even though knowledge in Greek is the word Sophia, but there is a reason I'm including it, which is beyond the scope of this already very long video. Just know Sophia and logos are intertwined. But that's a bit of an odd spread, isn't it? Why is the word for word synonymous with logic or knowledge? Seems like they don't have much to do with each other. That is, until you understand what's really trying to be said here. You know, all of these ancient writings we associate with religion today are incredibly cryptic and strange. It's just that it's all been so watered down that the profundity of the mystery is lost. Simply put, normies ruin religion, but that's a whole other rant. And when you look at the scripture, the book of John is one of the most important books within it, and it starts off with a very mysterious message. The passage reads, "In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God." And you'd really be hard-pressed to find any real in-depth dialogue about what in the world this even means. It's all very surface level, as I mentioned. But what I see John saying is the quiet part out loud. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. You can already see this loop of self-justification going on here. You could interpret this passage as saying, in the beginning was knowledge itself. Knowledge was with God and was God. This is the Christ, the Son of God. It's just that in Christianity, they believe this entity was physically incarnated into a man called Jesus, the living embodiment of perfect knowledge, which would explain why he could see everyone's fate. It's important to understand that the people who made these words had a different perspective than us. They had fewer ways of explaining reality. Their dictionary was literally smaller than ours, but they weren't less intelligent. Logos means word. But you could say word is like an ancient stand-in term for to be. The God of the Old Testament introduced itself as I am. You know, the Jews call it Adonai, Yahweh, even though you're not technically supposed to say it according to their tradition. The reason why logos means both word and logic is because being is the creation of logic. They are interdependent. Being is closure, patternness, aka rules. Rules are always the creation of a limit. Even if you say the only rule is there are no rules, you've still created a rule. It's containment. As soon as you introduce borders or limits, you create logic, because logic is just the manipulation of rules. And you only need one simple premise or rule to kickstart the entire landscape of dynamics we call logic. That premise is I am. I am this. I am not that, therefore this is not this. You have this and that statements, and or, if and only if. It's the assigning of an identity, their I amness. This is an expression of the infinite. It's the exhaustion of potential. When you say this is, in that moment, you eliminate all other options. It has no potential left. You collapse the wave function. Without this, logic falls apart and the ability to grasp and understand disappears. Why do you think logic falls apart in the face of the superposition? Because it has no identity. It is unresolved. It's open. Why do you think the naming of animals is the first thing Adam is asked to do in the garden? Naming things are a huge component of the Abrahamic religions. Naming demons, calling on certain names. Because to name is to identify, and to identify is to know. And to know, well, that's the weird part. It's some kind of power. I'm sure you've heard knowledge is power before. Learning is spooky and we really take it for granted. We can duplicate the power which fuels the stars here on Earth only because we know. We can only go as far as we know. There's all kinds of things that are possible right now. We just don't know how to do it. When you see the 2D flatlander in the circle, you think, why can't it just walk out? Because it doesn't know how. That information is hidden from it. It's the same way you are trapped in eternity. No matter what you do, you cannot reach tomorrow. But an alien intelligence could walk right out of forever. Your set of available actions are limited to your comprehension. Julius Caesar couldn't ask about the iPhone. If you take the automobile, for example, there was nothing stopping the automobile from existing in the year 100. They just didn't know how. I could send you back in time and you could probably build one. All of the resources are there to do it. If I lock you in a room with absolutely zero light that has a door which is sealed by a code, even if I dropped you the code written on a piece of paper, you could still never get out. You have no way to access the information even though it's right there in the room with you. So you're stuck. This is all because of the nature of knowledge. In the Christian tale, reality famously began with words. Even in Islam, the Quran states Allah says be, and it is. And this is where people normally get it all confused. This isn't about a literal utterance. God said doesn't mean God spoke, like how I'm speaking to you now. It's thought. When you get down to the brass tacks, existing is no different from thinking. Knowledge and intelligence is the ability to apprehend pattern, which is somehow the same thing as thinking thoughts. I've been driving this point home that discovery is simultaneously an act of creation. This is the tension between memory and the imagination, discovery versus creation. It's like we are playing hide and seek with ourselves. Because we are children of this process of being, we can always appeal to an external authority, as I mentioned earlier. This is why solipsism is looked at as silly. If you tell someone that things only exist when you are experiencing them, it comes off as childish and ridiculous. We know the world doesn't disappear when we're not looking because we can appeal to greater external factors like the laws of physics. However, if you imagine a scenario where there is no external authority, there is nothing outside of you, then the only way for something to come into being is to create it. I create as I speak. This is the weirdest part to understand because it is so fundamental. Instead of thought, maybe you can just plug in the term consciousness if it makes more sense to you that way. To know something and to be conscious of something are ways of expressing the same thing. We also say to be aware of, right? I wasn't aware of that. I think, therefore I am. To think is to be, and to be is to know, and to know is to think, and you get into this loop of self-justification as the Apostle John does. The Apostle John and Descartes are going back to the fundamental ground of being, and it turns out that ground is knowledge itself. This is the most fundamental thing that we cannot get behind. And since we cannot get behind it, we say it is the beginning. In the beginning, right? Nothing could exist before thought because that is where explanation starts. This is what language does. It is a container for thoughts. It's the clothing the ghost is wearing. Take spoken language, for example. When I speak, I am transmitting my thoughts to you. The words are like the power line the signal travels through. It's a bridge for meaning to walk across, and we are like the words of God, thought that is clothed in what we perceive to be matter, the bridge that meaning is walking across. The reason why there is order instead of pure randomness is the same reason why there is something instead of nothing, because being, order, thought, awareness, and consciousness are all one in the same. I think, therefore I am. It's funny because we know jack squat about thought. I'll admit we have some pretty robust explanations of cognition, but thought and cognition are not the same. We can see what our brain is doing when we are having thoughts, but we are not our brain activity. For example, the same part of two different brains could be active, but one is thinking about dancing and the other is thinking about rain. The brain isn't what thought is. It's where thinking takes place in the human being. It's like a temple where something lives. This is the logos. The human being, for whatever reason, has been pulled into higher domains of thought. It's like we have been knighted by nature for a special purpose. We are in communion with the logos. It talks to us. It's what you experience as thinking. It's the voice you hear in your head. It's how you're able to have ideas. Where do you think my ideas come from? Haven't you noticed that when you speak, you open your mouth and words just come out? You aren't actively ordering them. It's almost a passive activity and you are just channeling them. Your conscious attention sort of fades into the background while language comes out. As a matter of fact, if you start paying attention to the words you speak while you're speaking them, you're bound to slip up and misspeak like how I'm doing now. We stop talking when we feel like the meaning of what we are trying to convey has been expressed. It's this intuitive feeling of self-expression. This is what the God of Christianity was doing. When it was creating, it didn't stop until it determined that it was good. This is how art works, which is why I say the human being is ultimately an artist. Philosophy is art. Even math is art. Anytime you express anything, you are doing art. You take something from the inside and put it on the outside, which is what reality is really doing. It's turning inside out. That which is imaginary is becoming real. Thinking is something we feel like we are doing, but it's actually something that is happening to us. There's been research into this. Human consciousness has been evolving over the millennia, and ancient man had a different form of consciousness than we did. They experienced thinking as a kind of schizophrenic external auditorial hallucination. A voice would appear in their head and tell them what to do and say. This is scripture in a nutshell, is it not? Many people called this voice God, the voice of the ancestors, and the Logos. Over the centuries, this voice became less of an intrusive force and more of just who we are. It became integrated into us. We stopped feeling like it was happening to us and just started to believe that it was us. Julian Jaynes talks about this, and it had a lot to do with changes in our brain function and stuff like that. But under certain conditions, it seems like you can disintegrate it. And I mean this in the literal sense of the word, to disintegrate. This thing that was integrated into us, we can sort of reverse this process. In simpler terms, it can once again be present as something separate from you. You see, people who go fooling around within the halls of the mind tend to come back with the same testimony. I take testimony fairly seriously because people tend to be honest about these kinds of experience. They are legitimately trying to process what happened to them. There's really no reason for them to lie. And due to the nature of my content, I get a lot of audience feedback, private messages from people who explain similar scenarios. People say in these trances, they encounter an entity. This entity is always explained in a similar fashion. Not necessarily in the way it presents, because sometimes it's a voice, other times it's some kind of visual schema, and many times it's both. But its nature stays consistent throughout each version. Some people say it appears to know everything. Others say it possesses knowledge so deep and ancient, it becomes alien at some point. You don't know if it's some forgotten ancient past or distant future. People say it can perform miracles and do the impossible, that it can radically transform your reality model, that it tries to communicate a message of thought being the same as reality, or that everything is somehow in your head, or that you can be anything by thinking it or believing it, or something like that. They cluster around this concept of the nature and power of thought. Even if you listen to the old psychonauts like Terence McKenna, who I think gave the best trip reports because he was such an elegant speaker, he talked about encountering a voice while in these trances that had a similar nature to what I'm describing. He would ask the entity to show itself for what it truly was, and as it peeled back its layers, revealing more of its true nature, he got to a point where he could no longer stand it. It was like he reached some kind of cognitive limit. His bandwidth was being exceeded, because that's what the Logos is. It's endlessly unfolding context, and eventually you get to some truly alien, mind-melting territory. Speaking of scripture being spooky and cryptic, this is very reminiscent of the transfiguration of the Christ, where Jesus reveals his true form to his disciples, and it's written like something straight from a Lovecraft novel. It's portrayed as an eldritch visage that somehow drives you insane just from looking at it. No one ever talks about what exactly happened there. They just call this mind-melting absurdity his glory and gloss over it. Well, I'm the type of person to ask, what do you mean glory? What is this glory you speak of? I guess you can say I have a habit of paying attention to nonsense. That's what makes me different. Most people instantly disengage when they encounter nonsense, but I study it. Maybe this is why I come off as a fool. People say I have this trickster style of communication. By engaging with nonsense, it gives you clear insight into what sense is, like a mirror of sorts. And I can keep going on and on with these descriptions and comparisons. I can talk about how this is connected to why people believe in advanced ancient civilizations, that we are star seeds from some distant galaxy or time travelers from the future, how the Logos is connected to spirituality, religion, schizophrenia, and psychosis. There is a reason for all of this. There is a reason why all of these things tend to cluster together. Once you understand what the Logos is, these reasons become clear. People tend to poo-poo ideas like this away and say this entity you encounter is just you talking to yourself, and you won't get any argument out of me because I agree. I'm not delusional at all. I'm very grounded in my approach to all of this. My problem with this is we just casually say that as if we know what myself is. We've come full circle to the question we've been asking for thousands of years. What in the hell am I? If someone with schizophrenia is actually talking to themselves, how can it appear so other and alien? How can this thing we call self be both local, which is how it appears under normal conditions, and non-local, which is how it appears under special conditions like altered states of consciousness or mental disease? If it's myself, why in the hell is it over there somewhere? I'll ask you this. If we can experience things which are ourself and be completely unaware that it is, be completely convinced that it's something distinct from us, just how far can we go with this? What else are we experiencing that we are truly convinced is not us, but actually is? The truth is that everything is one thing being everything. Even the science is playing with the idea that reality is a unified field. There is only one self, and myself is just how I participate in it. We use words like myself and I so casually because we have forgotten what we are. That's what embodied existence is. It's a forgetting of some kind. It's hidden information, amnesia. When a border is created, you cauterize the connection. You literally seal yourself off from the unified whole. This is what the Logos does. It creates witnesses. The unified field is fractally diced into infinite bits, thus creating little I's, little I ams, which are the prerequisite for experience and knowledge. Thought is in this metaphase where it's something we do that simultaneously happens to us. It's this tension between discovery and creation. You can't control it even though we try. It's more like you can choose to pay attention to it or not. If you've ever dabbled in meditation, you're taught that you can't control your thoughts. You sit with them and observe them. Look at psychotherapy or the Jungian practice of active imagination. It's just you observing your own thoughts. We call it introspection. This is thought thinking itself, the old Gnostic proposition of self-reflection, self-reference, self-justification. We are all participants in the self-reflection of the Logos. It's as I mentioned, we are like little minds in a hive mind. It's one singular identity that is comprised up of infinite unique parts. I'm the Logos seeing what it's like to be Tyrone. You are the Logos seeing what it's like to be you. It's seeing what it's like to be everything from every possible angle. It's the computational limit. Introspection is how we self-reflect internally, but externally, meaning things you consider to not be yourself, this self-reflection is experienced via a specific mechanism of action: communication. Now we circle back to the beginning of this video, sense and nonsense. Communication is how objects are linked across space, space being the key word. Distance creates difference. Communication is able to exist because there is a space in between objects, a gap, aka hidden information. When we communicate, we bridge this gap. We reveal hidden information. If I knew everything about you, there would be nothing to talk about. If you knew everything, there would be nothing left to imagine. That's another one of my catchphrases. Communication is how we find the sameness in our difference. We say that we relate to one another, right? Communication is how you relate to something else. The Logos is a living system of intelligence that is turning itself inside out via communication with itself, self-reflection. Everyone's perspective have them being right side up, remember? Let's say you meet someone who has a different perspective than you. Let's exaggerate it for effect. You meet someone who has the opposite worldview from you. From both of your perspectives, you are the one who makes sense and the other person is upside down. You don't understand how someone can believe the things they do. It's nonsense. Well, what communication does is pull you into each other's world. You start to see things from their perspective. Something which appears to be impossible or absurd magically starts to make sense. And before you know it, you're eating pineapple on pizza. And we call this learning. You fill the gaps in your perception. You expand your understanding. Two differing perspectives interpenetrate each other and unify. This unification is a domain of higher complexity that serves as the platform for more activity. The philosopher Hegel talks about this. He calls it a dialectic process. The dialectical process says that thesis and antithesis annihilate each other to form synthesis. This synthesis is what the syzygy is in Gnosticism. If you know, you know. I say when memory and the imagination meet, they birth a new child. Or to better match the framing of this video, you could say when sense and nonsense communicate, they resolve their tension. It's the sameness of difference. It's a concrescence. It's intersection. This is emergent complexity. This is the modus operandi of the Logos. It's resolving the tension within itself. It's processing complex emotions. If you're one of my OG listeners, you've probably heard me say that before. Look at Jung's psychodynamics. The goal is to make the unconscious conscious, to make the unknown known. The anima and animus and the integration of the shadow. This is just the expansion of consciousness, to learn who you are by seeing how you relate to reality. This is what communication facilitates, and nature demands this. It isn't optional. Nature demands cooperation. It's taking place on all levels, even when it doesn't seem like it. Even the wolves and rabbits are cooperating, although it doesn't seem like it. The wolves can't eat all of the rabbits, or they both lose. Nature forces them into a hidden contract. It's what we perceive as balance. It's how information is exchanged. It's why the very first thing you learn to do when you come into this world is communicate. It's the entire goal of an education. Molecules are doing it. Organisms are doing it. All systems do it because that's what a system is. It's some kind of Communication, it's an organism, it's organization. Do you think money runs the world? No. Energy runs the world, and money is just a medium of exchange which represents said energy. Economies don't run on money, they run on trade. That's the real value. That's what money represents, the GDP, at least it's supposed to. You have rice, we have water. Let's make a deal. Trade is a line of communication. It forces countries to integrate their differences. It doesn't matter how bizarre I think you and your people are, it benefits us to do business together. Then over time, we cross-pollinate. It's inevitable. For example, our diplomatic alliance allows safe travel in between our nations. Now you have international tourism, and people are going to be attracted to each other, and there's going to be international baby making, and we're slowly learning more about each other. When communication breaks down, trade routes become affected and everyone loses. The species suffers. I don't know when you are watching this, but we are living through this right now in 2026 with the United States and the Strait of Hormuz. I know I often sound woo-woo and out there, but I can show you how everything I'm telling you is directly relevant to real life. I've cracked the code. This is the entire purpose of this system, for us to integrate our differences, to resolve the tension and unify into our destiny. I can only imagine this destiny to be some kind of radical empathy, to feel everything, not to dissolve into nothing, but to become everything. And by becoming everything, you somehow become nothing once again. Wolfram is on record saying that if we were to colonize the Ruliad, we would cease to exist. There are some kind of cotangent states, being nothing and being everything. I believe this irresolvable paradox is actually what Hegel calls synthesis. It looks like nothing because it sits in a higher dimension. It's unity. It's what I call destiny, the final emergence that takes place after all potential has been exhausted. To be loved is to be seen, to be known and remembered, to matter, to mean something. And we are heading towards that. We are finding out that we matter. We are discovering the real meaning of all of this.